A handful of black powder can outlast the gardener, outlast the crop, and in some soils outlast entire civilizations. That sounds like late-night scam copy, so hold that suspicion, because the honest version is less magical and more disturbing. A treatment cheap enough to cost only a few dollars for a small bed has been sitting in plain sight while companies make fortunes selling nutrients that wash away, gas off, or lock up after rain. The people who built some of the most fertile human-made soils on Earth were doing this in the Amazon centuries before modern agribusiness existed, although they were not working with perfect precision, and neither will you. The question is not whether the material exists. The question is why a fix this durable stayed off the shelf for so long. Most fertilizer programs fail for one brutal reason. They feed the plant for a moment instead of upgrading the soil that is supposed to hold the meal. Nitrogen fertilizers are highly soluble, which is why they work fast, but that speed is exactly the problem. If roots do not catch the nitrogen in time, part of it leaches downward, part runs sideways with stormwater, and part escapes upward as ammonia or nitrous oxide. EPA is blunt about this. Unused nitrogen and phosphorus leave fields through runoff, leaching, and gas loss, then help drive algal blooms, hypoxia, and contaminated water downstream. Convenient for sales, terrible for soil. The numbers are uglier than most labels admit. USDA-linked research notes that globally only about one-third of fertilizer nitrogen applied to cereal crops ends up harvested in the grain, which means the rest is not building food where you paid for it, although high-skill management can improve that percentage. That is like buying 3 bags and watching 2 vanish into drainage, air, or chemistry you cannot reverse with wishful thinking. The crop gets the headline. The losses get buried in footnotes. Phosphorus has a different trap. It does not necessarily flee the field, but it often becomes chemically tied up in forms roots struggle to access, especially in highly weathered or acidic soils where iron and aluminum grab it tightly. So growers keep adding more. The plant looks greener for a while. The bank account looks smaller for much longer. Then there is the structural problem nobody puts on the front of the bag. Soluble NPK does almost nothing to create long-lived pore space, durable carbon habitat, or lasting cation exchange surfaces. You are renting fertility by the season instead of owning the storage system. Here is what they don't tell you. A recurring input business thrives when your soil remains dependent. That is not a theory. That is the invoice. The material is called biochar, scientifically described as biomass-derived black carbon produced by pyrolysis, which means heating organic material with very little oxygen. On the surface, it looks like crushed charcoal. At the molecular level, it behaves more like a carbon scaffold packed with pores, edges, aromatic rings, and reactive sites that change as the material ages. Not every batch is equal. Feedstock matters, temperature matters, clean production matters even more. Why does it work when ordinary fertilization keeps slipping through your fingers? Start with surface chemistry. Cornell's Terra Preta research found that biochar-rich Amazonian dark earths have higher cation exchange capacity than nearby soils with the same mineralogy, even at identical organic matter levels. That matters because cation exchange capacity is basically the soil's ability to hold on to positively charged nutrients like potassium, calcium, magnesium, and ammonium instead of letting them flush away. Cornell traced this to oxidation on the biochar surface and the adsorption of non-biochar organic matter, which creates more charge density on extremely tiny particles, often smaller than 50 micrometers. Small particles, huge consequences. USDA's National Organic Program Technical Report adds the rest of the puzzle. Biochar is porous, so it can improve aggregation, reduce bulk density, create refuge for microbes, and help sandy or coarse soils hold more water. Its surface functional groups bind cations. Its pH is often neutral to alkaline, with a reported range of 4.81 to 11 and a mean around 8.1, so in acidic ground it can behave like a liming material and reduce aluminum toxicity. Although that same alkalinity can be unhelpful in already alkaline soils, the effect is not wizardry. It is physics, chemistry, and microbial real estate working together. Now, add time, and this becomes almost embarrassing for the modern system. USDA describes biochar as long-lived in the environment, with persistence measured in hundreds to thousands of years. That does not mean every garden stays productive forever with zero maintenance, because crops still remove nutrients and climates still punish mistakes. It means the carbon framework itself can remain in place long after normal organic matter has decomposed. You are not merely feeding roots, you are altering the architecture of the soil. That architecture helps explain the Amazon story. Cornell says Amazonian dark earths, locally called terra preta de Indio, were most likely created by pre-Columbian indigenous peoples from 500 to 2,500 years before present. These soils are not naturally widespread miracles. They are anthropogenic soils, meaning humans built them. Cornell also notes phosphorus concentrations reaching 200 to 400 milligrams per kilogram, along with higher cation exchange capacity, higher pH, and greater base saturation than the surrounding soils. In other words, the ancient Amazonians were not just farming on fertile ground, they were engineering fertility into ground that should have been far poorer. That timeline matters. Reports of these dark soils were written down in the 19th century by Smith in 1879 and Hart in 1885, but the deeper scientific argument took far longer to mature. For years, outsiders guessed volcanic ash, lake sediments, or geological accidents. Later research shifted the consensus toward indigenous soil management. That is one of the most revealing parts of this story. The evidence sat there in black earth the whole time, and modern culture still leaned toward exotic explanations before giving full credit to the people who made it. Cornell's field observations get even harder to ignore. The university notes that fallow periods on Amazonian dark earths can be as short as 6 months, while nearby oxysols often require 8 to 10 years. In Assutuba, Cornell cites land under continuous cultivation without fertilization for more than 40 years. That is not proof that every backyard can skip inputs for decades, because climate, crop choice, and soil texture all change outcomes. It is proof that a carbon-rich soil system can retain fertility in a radically different way from the dump-and-pray model most growers know. But here is where it gets uncomfortable. Stay with me. Cornell also found that when inorganic nutrients were applied to dark earth, nutrient leaching could exceed what was seen in fertilized ferrosol. That means biochar is not a license to overfeed. It is a platform, not a pardon. If you treat it like a sponge and then flood it with salts, you can still create the same old mess with a more expensive ingredient. The honest lesson is not biochar replaces all fertilizer. The honest lesson is biochar changes how efficiently soil can use, store, and cycle fertility. That distinction is exactly why the people selling quick response nutrients rarely lead with it. There is one more piece almost nobody mentions: quality control. USDA warns that badly made biochar can carry polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, heavy metals, or other contaminants depending on feedstock and production conditions. High temperature processing can raise PAH risk. Manure or sludge sources can concentrate metals. Dust can irritate lungs during handling. So yes, the ancient principle is powerful. No, every black bag at the store is not automatically safe. The science is real. The caveats are real too. That combination is why this subject deserves more than hype. Now follow the money, because this is where the silence starts making sense. Nutrien reported $25.972 billion in 2024 sales. Mosaic reported $11.1 billion in 2024 net sales. Yara reported $13.934 billion in 2024 revenue and other income. That is more than $50 billion from 3 major players alone, and those companies operate on products farmers must buy again and again because soluble fertility is designed around seasonal replenishment, even when used responsibly. A long-lived soil amendment does not fit that rhythm nearly as well. It sells once, then sits there working. That does not mean executives gather in a secret room and twirl their mustaches. The mechanism is more ordinary and more effective. Capital flows toward repeat purchases, standardized products, and regulations that are easy to scale. Plain biochar is hard to patent in its basic form because charred biomass is ancient chemistry, although branded blends can be differentiated around the edges. A bag of nitrogen has an obvious analysis and an annual sales cycle. Biochar varies by feedstock, temperature, ash content, surface area, contamination profile, and intended use. Investors prefer something cleaner on a spreadsheet. Then come the gatekeepers. The International Biochar Initiative says it began building standards in 2009, launched the IBI Biochar Standard in 2015, and now works with Carbon Standards International on certification pathways that require laboratory testing. Read that carefully. For years, one reason biochar stayed marginal was that there was no universally trusted standard defining what could be sold or certified as safe, consistent biochar. Meanwhile, USDA's own organic technical review focused on PAHs, heavy metals, feedstocks, and processing risks. Necessary caution? Absolutely. Fast path to shelf dominance? Not even close. Certification bodies did not invent the material, but their slow framework certainly did not help it spread. So the profitable system kept promoting nutrients as the product, while the older wisdom treated soil structure as the product. That is the secret hinge in this entire story. Once you see it, the aisle at the garden center looks different forever. If this channel keeps surfacing buried knowledge like this, help it survive. Subscribe, because the algorithm hides inconvenient information the same way industries do. That click is not fandom, it is refusal. Step 1. Buy clean, plant-safe biochar instead of making a random backyard batch. Look for agricultural, horticultural, or certified material with testing behind it, because USDA warns that poor feedstocks or bad pyrolysis can leave behind PAHs or heavy metals. When you open the bag, the texture should feel light and gritty, not greasy, and the smell should be earthy or faintly smoky, rather than chemical or tar-like. Wear gloves. Wear a dust mask. Black dust in your lungs is not part of the ancient wisdom. Step 2. Pre-wet it before anything else. Dry biochar is dusty, hydrophobic in some cases, and annoying to work with. Put the material in a bucket or wheelbarrow and mist it until it feels evenly damp, like a wrung-out sponge. Not soupy, not crunchy, just dark, cool, and settled. This simple move makes the next steps cleaner and helps the pores start accepting water. Some biochars repel moisture at first, so give them a few extra minutes if beads sit on the surface. Step 3. Charge the biochar. This is the step most people skip, then complain that nothing happened. Fresh char is like an empty apartment building. If you bury it unoccupied, it may temporarily grab nutrients your plants wanted first. Mix roughly equal volumes of damp biochar and finished compost, then add enough water to make the blend uniformly moist. If you do not have enough compost, combine the char with diluted liquid fertilizer or worm casting tea and let it sit 24 to 72 hours. As it rests, the sharp, smoky scent fades, and the mix starts smelling more like forest floor. That is what you want. Step 4. Apply conservatively. Penn State cites a Utah extension maximum of 10 tons per acre as a one-time application, which works out to about 0.46 pounds per square foot. For a home bed, starting lower is wiser. Use roughly 1/4 to 1/2 pound per square foot, especially if this is your first attempt or your soil already has decent organic matter. Because bulk density varies wildly, weigh it if you can instead of trusting scoop size. Spread it across the surface like dark coffee grounds, then mix it into the top 4 to 6 inches of soil. You want contact with the root zone, not a black crust on top. Step 5. Water deeply right after incorporation. The bed should feel slightly springier under your hand, and the dark particles should disappear into the soil rather than float around like ash. Over the next few weeks, watch for 2 things: the soil staying evenly moist for longer between waterings, and plants holding color more steadily after rain or heat. Do not expect fireworks in 48 hours. Biochar often acts like a quiet infrastructure upgrade, not a dramatic stimulant. Step 6. Pair it with normal fertility, but reduce the urge to overdo soluble inputs. If you already fertilize, keep using reasonable rates while the char becomes biologically integrated. Remember Cornell's warning: when dark earth received inorganic nutrients, leaching could still spike. Think of biochar as leverage. It improves retention and habitat. It does not exempt you from nutrient discipline. Compost, mulch, and measured feeding still matter. Step 7. Reassess after 1 full season. Dig a small hole. Healthy amended soil often looks darker, smells richer, and breaks into crumbly aggregates instead of hard slabs, although clay and sand will respond differently. If your ground was acidic and weak in structure, the change may be obvious. If your soil was already excellent, the gains might be subtle. That is still useful. Better water retention and steadier nutrient holding are wins, even when they do not produce viral before and after photos. 2 honest caveats before you try it. First, biochar is not plant food by itself. It is mostly a storage and habitat medium, so in severely depleted soil you still need nutrients entering the system from compost, residues, or fertilizer. Second, the wrong product can backfire. Penn State notes that very high surface area biochar can bind herbicides or pesticides, and USDA warns that contaminated material can introduce toxins. Ancient principle, modern quality control. You need both. The ugliest part of this story is not that biochar exists. It is that a culture built on repeat purchases taught people to obsess over feeding plants while ignoring the soil's ability to keep anything they paid for. Indigenous Amazonians built fertility that lasted. Industrial agriculture built a billing cycle. Those are not the same vision of land, and only one of them makes dependency look normal. So when somebody tells you the answer to weak soil is just another seasonal bag, remember what was hidden in black earth the entire time. The real asset was never the nutrient alone. It was the structure that stopped loss before loss became profit. Next time, we're opening the file on the ancient mineral that makes roots mine phosphorus while fertilizer companies sell the same deficiency back to you. They sold you symptoms, not soil,